like in black and white. I don't go live very often. I think what I want to talk about is maybe Advaita, but I haven't really listened to videos on Advaita for over a year now, so that seems like the topic that's on my mind, but since I haven't brushed up on it recently, I'm not sure if that's the actual topic or if I have a good enough understanding to talk about that. Yeah, but some topics that I may cover are egoic disidentification, certain things I'm sort of just tired of, like short form social media dopamine hits. Not just that, but also the way that I see the same patterns playing out in real life, lived social structures and interactions, which I'm not seeing always too much a difference between that and these short form social media hits, which has me questioning things because I used to make such a distinction between those things and sort of label, oh, real life interaction is good, and then scrolling or whatever is bad. Now I'm just gonna say I'm a little more tired of scrolling, for sure. It doesn't pique my interest anymore. It was a phase. Might come back to that phase, who knows. I think it piques a lot of people's interest because of the novelty of it, because it's only been within the last like 10 years. Also, I'm getting on at a time of night where I don't think anyone would be on, because this is going to be quite random and I'm not used to like going live, so yes, recently that is. Anyhow, yeah, so there's a lot of sort of, I'm tired of movies, I'm tired of flashiness, I'm tired of the interactions I have socially, trying to, hearing and seeing people try to emit this energy of shock factor through various different ways that I don't see as being any necessarily different from what I used to vilify online versus real life. Which I don't know if can be vilified to the worldview I'm going towards now anyways, either of those things. Online or real life or shock factors. Because what I want to do this video for is, I think it's going to be a purposefully boring video. I don't want the shock factors. I don't want to tell you that there's an elite group of people or archons conspiring to feed off of your energy and aliens who are out to get you. That's another phase I went through, by the way. Yeah. And I sometimes go back to some of these conspiracies, but I was realizing tonight that I don't like believing in that stuff. And if it's a belief, then I can choose what I believe. So if an alien comes in through my window here or my door, then I could say for sure, and then they do something harmful, then I could maybe say with more certainty, like, there are extraterrestrial beings or beings that we consider higher than us actively trying to take our energy or cause us harm or do something in a certain way. But because these things are like beliefs and sort of like in the minds of people, then I don't really desire to believe that until I do see it. That's not to say I don't have faith and I don't have certain beliefs. But it is to say I think we should have a lot more say in what we believe. So if you are in any kind of organization and that organization or order that you're in is saying truth statements as if they are facts, something that you can realize is you don't have to take it at face value and fact if it's words being spoken that you have not directly seen and experienced yourself. You can choose to take that on as your own belief and connect with that egregore of thoughts, or you can choose to sort of branch off onto your own beliefs. You can even like make that belief that they're preaching or telling you more interesting and expound on that more and make more stories and branches off of that, based partially off of your worldview and your own personal experience perhaps, or based off of nothing at all. It's a belief. It's what you choose to believe. And so of course, with beliefs, it would be logical to take evidence and consecutive happenstances as evidences towards certain beliefs. And so if you want to take the logical route and the logistical route and the chronological route, you could in your mind play out those patterns of cause and effect, which is a common one of saying like the elites perhaps are benefiting off of the resources of the people who have less. And you can see a lot of cause and effect and consequence to point to that belief being true. All of that said, when you get down to another angle of that though, and you get down to the present moment awareness and the now, and your actual experience you're living out, that still is a story. Now, I'm not saying it's not a true story, but it's a story nonetheless. Whereas any power that you can hold going towards what you choose to believe and what you choose not necessarily even to believe, because you could still believe certain things and not be focusing on them and they're not affecting you as much. So it's more about where you choose to turn your focus within all of the belief systems that you hear, right? So like, where's your focus at and where do you want to go with it, right? And I'm not giving you very concrete examples of this. I feel like it's sort of, which maybe I don't want to give you concrete examples of, because the more I can describe through these words that aren't very concrete with less analogy, which I love analogy, but if I don't give you analogies, then you're free to wander in your mind and create what you hear from my words for yourself a little bit more than you would have otherwise been had I given you a clear-cut sort of analogy. And analogies oftentimes don't match the direct message I would like to display anyways, but they're sort of just an offshoot or a branch from that, which is why, like you think of Jesus teaching in parables. The parable is, it's not the story itself, it's not the characters themselves, it's the principle derived from that which is important. And so if I were to tell you any concrete examples of this, uh, your minds might go to the images around the analogies I give, rather than having something closer to a pure creation in your own minds. Just a thought, right? Yeah. And so Advaita, though. Advaita. Haven't really gone into it yet, have I? Even though I thought that was going to be what I was going to go into mostly. But I think, actually, no, I'm not going to go into it yet. I have wondered sometimes if certain, if we pair labels of the Western worlds, and start to pathologize things a little bit, which is not something I like to do, but I want to point out that it's done a lot, is like, you know, we label something, we have a diagnosis, we try to describe something for the benefits and for the very sort of material gain of what can we then do about that situation to improve things. And we can only come to those conclusions by firstly labeling or diagnosing something, and explaining what it is and coming to common ground, and perhaps sharing the definitions from the vocabulary words that we are using to describe that thing. And so those help us come to common ground. And then when you come to common ground, you can sort of have this energy of spinning around each other, back and forth conversation, throwing a ball back and forth. That's an analogy, sorry. But then you can do something about it. We like doing. So many people like doing if you're in the phase of doing. And doing is also a coping mechanism, actually, because it's putting the power back into your hands. So sometimes it can lead to whatever goal you're trying to achieve, which can be then labeled as either something being completed, I'm going to make up a word here, wholeified, like becoming whole. Sorry, dumb word. So yeah, you first come to common ground on it, you go back and forth on it, you learn about it, you hash it out. If it were a math problem, you would undertake to take, like, you would start the steps to solve it. And it's all kind of just like music. It's all kind of a cadence. Resolve onto the next thing, onto the next flow, and believing that things are improving, or getting better, or aligning with the outer reality more, or whatever the goal tends to be, right? And so yeah, that's what like healing's all about. That's what wholeness is all about. That's what communication becomes about. Well, that's what communication seeks to derive, is those resolutions, of course. Not that that's what it's about, but that's what it goes towards. And what's the point of all of it? There isn't one. And that's where we come to Advaita. There's not really like an end. There's not really like a real final resolve that finalizes absolutely everything. But there is a constant seeking for that, it seems like. I don't know if that's part of Advaita. But part of Advaita is the constant thing that's playing out that so many think of as reality. It's real. If you're a reductionistic materialist, of course, then you'll just kind of see things at face value. You'll take your senses, and you'll more particularly take what your senses seem to match up with other people's senses, and then take that as your baseline reality, which is fair. That makes sense to do that, I guess. It's a good start. It's a good baseline to like base your reality off of. It's what babies do, children seeking validation from parents. It's what kind of like behaviorism is all about. It's a step on the way. It's completely what the Matrix or the reality is stabilized from. And so I used to actually look at that as a negative thing and a bad thing. And so a lot of these things I point out to you, when I've heard them talked about, it's funny. I would listen a lot to Alfie Kohn for a while, and behaviorism, and just have this like, from having dived into the harmoniousness of behaviorism for such a large part of my life without even thinking or realizing it, because it's just so easy, seemingly. It definitely has its downfalls. So from going from that to then realizing, but then like this idea that what's rewarded and what's punished makes up who I am, I don't like that. And so then comes this extreme resistance to the products of capitalism or behaviorism, or being rewarded with coin, with money for performing, for dancing like a monkey, for doing whatever they're telling you to do. But then you also, there's layers upon layers of this. I don't know if you can, like, for so many of us, we're at that point of huge resistance to that behaviorism. And yet it's a natural childhood development for that to be first seeking the validation and getting the rewards and avoiding the punishments. This is what children do. But then they play a little bit, and they see what it's like to be invalidated, to be punished, which is still a form of attention. And then another phase in the process is this fading into stillness and nothingness of seeking no attention whatsoever. I don't personally see others in that phase, but I felt that one to my core. And I think the only reason you don't see people in that phase is because that's not how we act when we're around people when we're in that phase. And so it can be seen as loneliness. It can be seen as solitude. Loneliness usually having a little bit more of a negative connotation. Solitude having potentially a positive connotation, right? But deep to the core, it's then the opposite. The going inwards away from any validation or invalidation or rewards or punishments. You're not seeking for anything. You're going into the darkness, you're going into the womb, you're going into maybe space, floating on everything and nothing. And that's the one I like to feel to my core. It can create a limbo though. Oh, and limbo's dangerous, they say. So they say it's far, far away from reductionistic materialism, that's for sure. It's far, far away from anything like capitalism or behaviorism. Oh, I thought that was a spider, but it was just a piece of lint. Okay. So I'm glad that wasn't a spider, though. My heart's beating faster. That's an interesting feeling to have, like, my heart beat, like, faster like that. Ah! Scared. Fear. What is fear? It's a response in your amygdala. What's your amygdala? It's a part of the brain. What's the brain? Now I sound like a you know, the little kid asking, why, what's that? And what's the brain? It's supposedly the thing in your head. And supposedly the amygdala and the thing in your head is what's guiding your thoughts and your memories and your actions. But then we expand to see the gut does that too, because there's a gut-brain communication going on. I never really liked the word gut, and the reason why is because, like, a lot of, like, health people say gut, and they're like gut-brain connection or a healthy gut. They're just talking about a healthy gut microbiome or whatnot. And I'm like, when I think of the word gut, I think of, like, the gruesomeness. Blech. And now what's that? A feeling of disgust. There's probably some neurons firing in my brain somewhere. I don't know what part of the brain from that feeling of disgust. But yeah. So the amygdala, though, there's, like, the fear. I wonder if disgust is related to fear, and so, you know, maybe the amygdala would fire with disgust too. But I'm out of that now. I'm not feeling that now. See how fast we, like, go in and out of things? See how fast you do? Like, listen to your inner dialogue, get out of the dialogue and then get into the feelings and see how fast you can go from one feeling to the next. It's very interesting. I think many times we stay in one feeling for a long time, but you can go through those feelings quite quickly. But the whole idea of fear is actually just a label. And then we try to map it out. We like, oh, it's in your brain. But I wonder how local it actually can be, how mapped out all of this can actually be, or if it's all non-localized. Especially if you get into, like, spooky physics. And those ideas of thoughts traveling in real time, not even at the speed of light. Faster. Crazy, right? Where was I going with this? Pretty much nowhere. That's the whole point of Advaita. I'm not really going anywhere. We think we are. We think we're mapping it out. We think we're, like, you know, using all these words and labels to describe things. And maybe it can relate to your experience or things you've heard about. And then we imagine, like, a connection between us, you and me, by any words that you have heard before and think you know the definition of. And those words relate to some of the words that I just said. And so then you'll get an idea of what they are. Yeah. So it's really funny. One phase that I've gone through is watching that Alex dude climb that building and that just really tall cliffy thing. And that's where I heard about the amygdala. Supposedly he has a lot less activity in his amygdala, and there's questions as whether that's like a correlation or causation thing. It's like, did he train so much that the fear is not there, or the activity in the amygdala, which we map out and label as fear and localize as fear, is that actually what causes him to do these amazing, truly amazing, like physical feats of strength and endurance. And the big one that we all seem to like be so curious about is lack of fear. Especially with anxiety. Me labeling myself to have had anxiety, others labeling me to have had that. And so being so egoically attached, and so that being a part of who I was like, what is this lack of fear that people can be this way? What is that? That's amazing, right? I want that. Yeah. So that was a phase I went through, learning about the amygdala, of course. Wishing for no fear, because wouldn't that be amazing? But it's interesting when you're in a state of fear, and then you're saying you're in a state of fear, and you're like actually in a state of fear. It seems to be like there's no question about that you're actually scared. There's some danger coming, and it's scary. And if you don't actually see that played out in real time in your real life, then some people may seek that state of fear, or by watching horror movies. Or maybe they're seeking to train what would be labeled to their own mind and nervous system as fear. And since they're not actually putting themselves in any actual physical danger, but they're having their like sweat glands and whatever processes going on watch something gory or jump out at you, I forgot, thrilling. Maybe they're trying to like validate that they're safe through exposing themselves to a safe fear. Maybe. It's an idea. So, yeah, we play these games with ourselves. We relate to the world around us to further validate the ego, which is, I know ego disidentification is such a big thing in the spiritual world, but sometimes you want to identify more with the ego. I said it. Sometimes you want to identify less with the ego, depending on your goals and what you're looking to achieve. And if you are looking to achieve anything whatsoever, it would be conducive to your goal to label yourself as the doer of that goal. I want to play the violin, so I am the doer of the violin, the violinist. My egoic attachment. Yes. And that's what I am. That's who I am. And then we call all of that into question. Is that who you are? Are you a doer of that thing? And in that moment you may be, but as we, kind of like an old movie, they like sifted through a bunch of frames. So as we like sift through more frames of our life, we go in and out of being the doer of that thing. Although when we label ourselves as I am this, we tend to see ourselves as more of that than just saying I do this, because we are not then the doer, but we're still doing something. And then you go completely out of doing anything, and that's ego disidentification. And I think it's important to be able to do that if you want to like fall asleep a little bit. Let go out of the doing, go out of the egoic identification. Well, not necessarily though, because I can like, honestly here, I can egoically identify as, even though I know it's a fantasy, as like feeling like I am a mermaid. So I egoically like have that attachment, and then I actually fall asleep easier. But in a sense, I'm disidentifying myself from the egoic based attachments of reality into fantasy. And so it's one level of letting go, and that's one method I use to fall asleep. So there's certainly a level of letting go, at least for me, in going into the darkness of falling asleep. Yes. Everyone has different methods though. But like, yeah, like the going into nothingness, the lack of doing, the thing that can't be really labeled at all, that's I think could be considered letting go of the ego to some degree. And I hadn't really necessarily thought of ego disidentification as that, as I had thought more of it as letting go of one role and going into a new role, but that's not necessarily disidentifying from the ego. That's more switching your role, or switching your egoic attachment from one thing to another thing. Yeah. So I think what I understand about Advaita, though, from what I learned about a long time ago, is that this is all like it seems like what I was hearing around it was that the whole reality is a story that we're telling ourselves. And I tend not to lean 100% into that, although I may someday, go in and out of that. I tend to see it as a dance between ourselves labeling the story on top of something where now I'm being a reductionistic materialist. Okay, I guess I'm egoically now attaching myself to being a reductionistic materialist for the purpose of explaining this. And so it's kind of just like structuring reality, though. Seeing the world around you, seeing the characters in that world, seeing the items and the objects, and face value senses, full sense perception. So tapping into materialism, and then looking purely at the setting and the objects and the baseline. And so that's a way your mind structures itself to make sense of the world, of course, which is a wonderful way to do that. It's kind of like the cornerstone, the foundation of a building. And so, at least that seems to be one of my cornerstones. I don't know how it is for you. And then from there, you get this ebbing and flowing and movements, which also can include part of that foundation, particularly when you have recurring patterns and actions from certain characters that you expect them to act a certain way because they have acted similarly in the past, and that gives the self another extra sense of structure and how you relate to them. And then that could potentially like build trust, and then oh yes, and then your projection, the most important part. That's what Advaita is seen as, from what I understand. It's the story you're placing upon all of that. So I see it as two things coming together: the foundation and the stability coming together with the your head's a projector. These are the lenses, and you actually do overlay a sense of good and evil, right and wrong. That's duality you can overlay onto it. And it's really interesting we have two eyes, so maybe we are inclined to have a little bit of judgment and duality and those things upon the experiences we have. Or we go to our third eye, our inner knowing, and see it as full oneness, completely present. And that's another way to overlay our beliefs, no, our experience, I don't know, onto what is, or what we deem as the structure being what is. And so there's a thought that I was suffering with, actually. I was struggling and suffering, wondering, how much do I have control over this reality? Because if it's all control, yikes, who wants that responsibility? Dude, nobody, like, like I really am responsible for all the things that have happened in this world? That's not even true, right? But could I potentially be responsible for what I overlay as my projection onto what I think of everything that has happened in this world? Yeah. And so, and then at the same time, there's both all control and no control, which probably evens it out into like some control and then also some letting go of control. And that's got to be something the closest to the truth that I can find, at least. Where I was like really, really, really struggling with like, do I really not have any say over all of the suffering going on, all of the craziness, the economic situations people are dealing with, I have like, there's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing. I'm the victim of everything. Either I'm the victim of everything or I'm responsible for everything. It's neither nor, or either or, whatever. It's not. The truth is lies somewhere in between. And then whatever you're projecting may or may not be the actual truth. It's just your idea of how much responsibility you think you have over how much you can change things if they are bad, and how much say you have over things, and how much you are just a receiver of everything with no say as to anything that happens, or the constructor of all of it and responsible for how you see it all. I think it's either something in between or something to both of those things. And then here, I'm already jumping into my minds, which is something that the Vedic astrology warns against. If I remember right, I haven't read anything about Vedic astrology for at least 6 years, but I think about it. And being a Pisces, it's like we tend towards more of, according to the egoic identification I have with being a Pisces and that personality and that character, I've learned that other Pisces, like me, we tend sometimes towards being the receiver of everything, on a somewhat neutral tone, and a victim of everything on a somewhat negative reflection of that, something that could be considered something so similar. So with a negative connotation, or we just see ourselves as victim, 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 or receive, receive, receiver, which I don't know how close you see those things to each other, but I see them as very close, just having a different connotation slightly, one being more neutral, one being more negative. And so that's how I see the Pisces character. And a lot of people don't tend to like that characteristic of a Pisces, it seems like. Although with what I understand of Vedic astrology, you see whatever sign you are, whatever sign everyone else is, and then because now that you've put that lens on the potential that you tend towards those characteristics, you're also now more able to have power over letting go of those characteristics completely, or choosing to take on those characteristics easily, or letting go of those characteristics which feels a little bit less natural for you. So towards the end of my readings on Vedic astrology, I came first full circle from not believing in astrology at all, or even personality quizzes at all, saying we have control over our characteristics and personality, to wait a second, I just learned about this one sign. That person was born during that sign. They act exactly like that. So making those connections, right? And then believing in it full-heartedly, because it seems so freaking accurate, right? And then coming to the Vedic astrology, the ending, and being like, oh, they're both that characteristic, and they can be nothing to do with any of those characteristics all at the same time. Because it's all an interplay with each other. And me being a Pisces, that's who I'm being, I guess. Me being a Pisces. Fishies, scared of everything, victim, tossed on waves. Mermaid, of course, beautiful mermaid. Well, then I can be total Pisces and total nothing to do with Pisces. As if it didn't exist. As if no astrology sign existed either. And that's ego disidentification, I guess. And that's what it talks about. Is you learn about the personalities. And I guess it's important to find yourself, right? Because people do that through astrology, but then they do it through like the most scientifically accurate personality quiz is supposed to be the Big Five personality. So they're like, science, yay. Let's go towards the Big Five personality quiz. Yay, science. Because science, for some people, is that more sure foundation of the characters that have played out in their life and the settings they've been in, perhaps school settings with books and teachers and classrooms and desks and papers and pencils, or in a lab where you're directly studying, like maybe you're doing, what do you call, I don't know. Yeah, you're directly doing those studies and directly coming up with your hypotheses and results, and you find structure, stability in that. Maybe you're paid to do that. Maybe you're incentivized, maybe you're not incentivized, but it seems to make the most logical sense to you. So then you lean towards science. You don't believe in astrology. You believe in the Big Five personality quiz, behavior personality quiz, because that one's the most scientifically accurate one. And then you learn about that, and it helps you. Because what is the Big Five? There's what is the Big Five? Oh, I can't even remember, dude. But yeah, there's these 5 personality traits, and then there's 2 ends of the spectrum of each trait, and then you either are kind of in the middle of all of them, or you lean from one end to another, and then that tells you a little bit about yourself. More language, more writing, more of these beautiful things humans create and come up with to discover stuff in the mind and then call it science. And they call it science because it's the ones who are doing it in like the academic setting that are doing it. I guess that's why they call it science. And then because it's science and can be relied upon, you can rely on it to help you know who you are, know how to interact with the world around you, maybe know who your mom is, know who your friend is, and guess their personality traits, and have a little game of it. And then where does that get you, though? You still sometimes feel like you have to go against your own personality to survive in the world, don't you? And that's where sort of mental struggle struggle. Oh. R's and L's, getting those mixed up. Anyways, can start to come in. Because you get the struggle of, so this is me. This is my personality. This is who I am. This is, even if you don't egoically identify that as who you are, but it's traits that you have. And so that's less of an identification. It's more mid-range. You use that as a map to where you go next and how things could pan out for you, what career you see yourself in, what setting you see yourself in, and it guides you somewhere. And then what? You get there and you live out that personality to some degree. But then you also have to do things that go against your personality for like a greater good or for the whole system. And then depending on what degree you feel like you're playing out your character versus playing to that system is where you make the decision whether or not you are capable, cut out for, not even capability, but whether you're like you know how different plants thrive in different kinds of environments. You're assessing whether you're that plant that thrives in the more shaded environment or in direct sunlight. And so, you know, maybe you took the Big 5 behavior personality quiz. Maybe you're going off of your astrology, and maybe you've taken career tests and you go into that career field and then you see for yourself, like, is this actually for me? Is this the environment that is this plant person? Are we tree people now? Is this what I thrive in, or am I going to survive here? Is this environment well suited to me, and am I well suited to this environment? And then it's a continual assessment of how you're doing there, of how survivable it all is. And so some people might say that this whole thing is about survival. I've heard that before. The whole entire thing. But here's an idea, like maybe you never actually die. And so if you start to believe that, see, that's where death can have a hold on you. Now, saying death has a hold on you, that sounds very woo-woo, but no, it's not. When the environment tells you, gives you the assessment that, like, you may or may not survive this. Here's the things that make it survivable. Here's the things that make it so you won't survive. When your environment can tell you that, whether that be other people, whether that be numbers adding up, and numbers that you need to get material items to sustain yourself, to continue in that environment. Often it's more complicated than you know, the world around you just saying, hey, you can survive here, hey, you can't survive here. It's also like it's the presence of how things exactly are right now, but it's also the projection of what the people are telling you around you. And the patterns of the Earth's weather systems, perhaps. Like, is this a good climate? Like, is this a good, yeah, whatever. So projections of the future is this going to be survivable? And this is where you sometimes have to break down your personality. And we see that as like something so traumatic. Oh my gosh. Which a lot of times it is. If it's too probably fast, if it's too jarring for you, and then your fear continues to increase, and the environment is getting less and less safe, then the whole system has to break down. And it's projected to, like, the enterprise is going to blow up. So what can we do to save it, right? And that's what survival is all about. And survival often feels like stuffing down your personal character, how you got to that place. Maybe you took a whole bunch of personality quizzes and realized you were Captain Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. And you get there, and that's who you are, and how you interact with the ship and the places you go. But then if the ship itself is breaking down, it warrants a change in your character. And so I don't really like this when people go through intense traumas and then someone else just says, oh, it builds character, but it does. But it also breaks down character. It has whatever you've come to the conclusion about yourself to be, now that has to all change, and you have to put it all down for an environment that is dying. And then that's where like things like sacrifice come in, like those ideas. Sacrifice. That's it could be like different things, sacrificing personality, sacrificing material items for the greater good. The giving tree sacrifices itself for the human boy. All kinds of different things and ways to look at it. But it is building, it's tearing down. It can be colossal and become traumatic and create extreme fragmentations in characters and extreme crises, both in environment further and the person and character. And then if the character becomes too at odds with the environment, that's when either massive changes need to be had and adaptations from the character or what is seen to be the character, or the environment has to adapt and you have to make the material changes there. And as humans wanting to survive, we often resist either change, but I think, at least with myself, I tend to resist changing the self, because the self seems so much more secure than anything else. But then adapting the self to meet the circumstances, because the reality is we're not merely a plant that thrives only in direct sunlight or only in more shade. We are beings that supposedly have neuroplasticity and can change our minds to the environment to match it if we so choose to. And to the degree that we choose to do that is the degree that we can match that environment. But also, I think it's within human nature to go for, like, if you want it to be less traumatic, small changes at a time. So hopefully your environment isn't changing too fast, so that your psyche can keep in rhythm with the motion of the change around you. And then there's really no trauma, that's growth. So I guess ideal health and longevity would be something along those lines of extreme receptivity. What we were talking about is comparable to victimhood if you're putting a negative spin on it. Extreme receptivity and presence to everything around you, bringing a sense of complete letting go along with that entirely. Surrender. Along with like this belief that within you is that neuroplasticity, is that ability to control what is right for you to control, to reenact your authenticity onto the situation and still be to some degree yourself. And then that environment would hopefully respond if that's a positive thing for you. Why wouldn't it be a positive thing for your environment too? In an ideal situation, of course. Yeah. So, these are all ideas on how to survive, right? If we actually do need to survive, that is. If death is a reality, which it seems to be. And we try to avoid anything too drastic, which is good, or what we label as good, because we don't like change. Big change seems to be like more linked to death. So, on one hand, if the environment also seems, I see a lot of people wanting to reality shift really fast. So that's not necessarily like fully traumatic, like I was just saying. I'll have to rethink that one a little bit. Yeah, they want to shift from like homelessness and poverty into being a billionaire. Big change. Who wouldn't want that? But there's something that you have to take into account, the nervous system and the psyche and the adaptations involved in that. And I mean, slow and fast is an illusion too. Time is to some degree an illusion. And so if that's the case, you can either just like jump there, potentially. How realistic is that? Or guide yourself slowly there, which feels a lot more realistic, and not necessarily from like homelessness to billionaire, but from unwanted state into a more desirable, comforting, whole, goal-oriented, and then you've met the goal kind of state. And so, what seems probably even better for your nervous system is seeing a goal that's like reachable, right? If there is a nervous system too. If there is any of this. If there's anything that I'm labeling at all, whatever. Okay, we'll go back to the point though. what seems healthiest and most sustainable to survival, not just of survival of yourself and life and death, but survival of systems that you want to keep perpetuating, as simply focusing your attention onto those systems and away from, well, not necessarily even away from systems. We can't say away from this because now your attention's on the thing I just told you to put your attention away from. That didn't help, did it? Yeah. So, the goal is to put your attention onto your next desire in hopes that that desire comes with good intentions for both you and the things around you and the people around you. Then we're getting into this holistic type of stuff, right? Then we're out like what seems to be out of survival, but ultimately it's still kind of survival, right? You're putting your attention onto win-win situations. You're starting to believe that it's not always necessary to sacrifice, that it's not necessary for someone to lose for you to win. And that will bode well for you. I can't believe I said that. There's somebody who I know who said the word bode well. And I'm like, that's funny. Anyways, that will bode well for you to be as harmonious with both authenticity about yourself. Idealism here. This is idealistic stuff. What's your ideal circumstance of what you've egoically attached your personality towards, or whatever? Like, not even just that though. What do you survive the best in? Like, how do you feel most yourself in? Not just trying to live, but dancing and breathing and singing and creativity and like maybe not any of those things if you're not interested in them. Like, how are you most yourself? Sciencey. So how can you be yourself and have that contribute to the environment around you? That's why I think like jobs are actually, kind of a good idea, like so important to, if we work them out right. And so many people just don't really have the choice because more into survival, more into just trying to live. You're stuffing down yourself to work for the larger system. But if you are in some work that's fulfilling you, you're bringing yourself there, and yourself is what gives to everyone and everything. And you do that in ways that feel real and helpful. Seems like it'd be a healthy thing. Seems like it. But if the system is so corrupt, we might call it, that people cannot do that. If people are working with everything they have just for some breadcrumbs that give them a tiny bit of energy, those breadcrumbs don't feel like who they are. We're way down on Maslow's hierarchy of needs then. Way down to starvation. So when people can't meet those basic needs, they can't even start to understand how they could contribute at all. They're working for the next. How are they going to survive the next? If you're in extreme heat or extreme colds, how are you going to survive the next 30 minutes? Can't think of any of this then. All this goes out the window. Everything. So, it's not easy knowing how to fit everyone where they would be happy and fulfilled. But a good start is that they are in some kind of good temperature environment, good air to breathe, food that nourishes their body so they can think and come to an idea of who they might be in relation to the world around them. And the world around them has given to them so much that they can only desire to give back. I'm an idealist, I guess, sometimes, huh? Yeah. So, I'm a dreamer. I'm a dreamer. That's for sure. Or am I? Is that something I've egoically identified with because other people told me I was a dreamer? I don't know. How much do I have a say over that? How much can I believe that? It's at this point that I dove into my ideals of people having right nutrition, beautiful spaces to live in that give to them, that they only continue in happy, beautiful, peaceful, authentic to themselves creations to go on and do more and more and more. And when I dive into those ideals, I agree with the ones who call me a dreamer. Because I like that. And sometimes we agree with other things people call us, and we have to wonder if we really are those things that people call us. And then if we have a negative idea or we don't relate to what they call us, then we get in a little bit of a mental gymnastics, wondering who we are again and again. And it's continually in with people, with yourself, with the environment, back to you, a dance with that reality. Ego, non-ego, sleep, wake, sun, moon, all of that. Nobody came into my life. This is the longest video I've done in a while. The other long videos I did, I totally deleted. Because I was worried what people would think. Interestingly enough. I wonder if I'll still, at some point after uploading this, worry what people think. And then take it down again, or keep it up. I wonder if it will get 0 views, or 10 views, or 3 views. But then, like, what does that really matter? Other than the behavioristic validation that I might tend to seek for, holding on to the ego. And then if I expect fewer views because I feel shy, egoically shy, then I might be actually happier. But then if I feel confident and hopeful that a lot of people can view this, then, never really thought about that one. So, yeah, I tend towards wanting to be a little bit more obscure, because who knows how people take these kind of things, especially if they're things they've never heard before. If I've used jargon somebody has never come across, that I happen to have come across, what kind of judgments might they place? I don't know. And then what does that matter? It does for survival, I guess. Because I guess that's me wondering how much to seek validation from specifically others or people around me. So that's why I would wonder about that, I guess. Yeah, interesting, the things that keep us from saying what's on our hearts and minds. Interesting, what keeps people from what might be considered truth. Interesting, what keeps people from sharing their own version of their true lived experience from the angle they're at in their own realities. And if it's accepted, will it become validated? Will they find that goal that a lot of people like of either positive attention or a certain form of connection that they seek? I have this idea in my mind that this would be incredibly boring to a lot of people I would know, or that the way that I speak is going to be different from some people I know. And so I'm curious. Yeah. I'm curious is all. But yeah. It's also, I know I'm getting slow. I'm slowing down here. So maybe that means it's time to get off. I wonder if I wanted to, I have another idea pop into my head though. And it's more of a reiteration of one thing I did talk about already. And that is something that's on my mind about, all of this still has some kind of roots in survival. Again, not just living, dying, which I'm so glad to be past that. Because at times I'm sure some of us have been there, close to life and death. Scary, right? So if we're farther from life and death, and seeking approval from others, then we're seeking life for future, life for others, their survival, perhaps our tribe. And I think a reason a lot of people do things is to help others, kind of. Although I don't know if that's just sort of an idea that one person's like, I want to help others, and the next person just sort of parrots that idea without really thinking about it. I get the feeling with the helping others idea that a lot of times it's like that. And that's just based off of my own lived experience. It's like, are you really looking to help others? Or is it like a two-sided thing? You're looking to help others and be validated in that process. Again, idealist, that would be a win-win for all. But to be validated in the process of helping others, you would have to help them in the correct way that suits their needs, of course. And that's not always easy to come by when you're helping others. I almost feel like if you're even of a mind to help others or to share, you are at a level of privilege. A lot of people use privilege as like a negative thing, but yeah, it's like you've passed certain stages of survival chasing you, and now you have something to give that's a little more, whatever that thing is, whether word, deed, whatever you can give. And I was going to go back to, yes, because this is something that constantly I'm going back and forth between. And there's a scripture about it, about like having the courage or whatever to change the thing you can't, or the wisdom to see, the courage to change the thing you can, the something to let go of the things you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's sort of a simple, I like simple sometimes, way of moving about in the world. When things get overwhelming or complicated, it's like, this is my job, that is not. Let's go. Simplify. Simplification activated. But if you like to also deep think about a lot of this stuff, which is very fun for me, if you cannot tell, at times, sometimes it's not fun. Right now, I guess it's fun for some reason. Then you get into, wait, like how much am I controlling? Controlling has a negative connotation. The reason is because, like, a lot of people try to control other people, and the people that they're trying to control, each person is kind of like a universe in and of themselves. And so the people trying to control other people are flawed in that thinking, because they will have an effect on those other people, and usually not the effect that they want to have, which takes the control even further away from them, which they're resisting more and more and more. And because they wanted and held on to the control so tightly of that person who's supposed to have choice. So you are trying to restrict somebody else's control by having more control. It usually probably isn't going to work out very well. I mean, sometimes it works. Sometimes it does. If somebody wants to be controlled, and then you say you're going to control them, and you do. But then did they really want to be controlled if they chose that they wanted that? Because still they're in the control, they're in the contract that they for themselves chose that. So then you can like kind of do whatever goal you're looking to do together. Go really far with that, because there's multiple people on the same goal. Multiple universes working together, going in whatever the same direction. But a lot of times what happens, even if that they wanted to give up their control to you for a short time, it's usually not very lasting. And so you really can't control people, no matter their age. Ultimately, newborn baby is a full person. So it's about harmonizing, not controlling. And if you do seek control, it's more likely the control will be fleeting and it will go away from you, and you'll have actually less control by seeking control. So many paradoxes, so confusing. Yeah. And so with this control thing, there are certain things that are beautifully and harmoniously supposed to be in your realm of control. You are supposed to control those things because there's an energetic contract that has been signed for you to work with those things together, whether that be people, systems, like actual physical items. You're like in contract with your sewing needle to make a dress, whatever you're trying to make. But a sewing needle doesn't have so much pushback as like a person. So that needs to really be understood. And that's why people are hard. That's why people like animals sometimes more. Because you get a being that is fully under your control from the start as a pet. And if you treat it well, it will respond to you in ways you want it to, probably. Unless it's a cat. An orange cat. Or some other, like, wild animals. Ooh, they will do unexpected things. So if you wanted control and you go get a raven, then you got the wrong pet. Yeah. A fish, maybe. I mean, you can like have a little controlled environment for your fishy. Fish. Yeah, like every being, it's in its own like little universe of how it operates. And we can look to other people and how they operate with those systems by watching like YouTube tutorials say, oh, how does this person interact with the oil and the oil pan to change the oil on that car, and what's going to happen if I do that? Or how does this other person as a baker interact with the dough and the oven? And if I have a similar looking oven with the same kind of dough, it's really likely to turn out like a pretty similar way if I do the things and follow the instructions that similar way. And so things that are like already in place that people have done, we can look to for guidance and be in more controlled systems where we can predict outcomes a lot easier. So I wonder if that's why intuition is so controversial. Because sometimes intuition, without going to a recipe or without going to something that has been cut and dry and rehashed and done by many people, and yeah, like if you go out on a limb whimsically, intuitively, and go straight for the interactions with either plants or a certain animal without actually knowing anything about it, that's a risk to your survival. I never thought of that being a reason why somebody might resist intuition over logic, because it's not mathematically mapped out and planned out and logistically put together already for you. You are pioneering by tapping into your intuition, which is both life-giving to you because it's exciting, while also being a risk. So intuition can be seen as risky. I had never thought of that before. Man, I've been like going more towards intuition and wondering why things weren't really working out. And that makes so much sense now. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like I was going for the riskier thing without even realizing it, thinking it was more just like creative, whimsical, more in line with like spirit and outside of what's mainstream. So not thinking about the risks of that, but seeing that the mainstream things in a collapsing economy and society weren't working, so full-heartedly going into intuition, not realizing the risks of that. And so whereas in 10 plus years ago I took certain tests saying that I pretty much was using my left brain a little more than my right brain, I wanted to reject that part of myself that was logical and mathematical. Interestingly enough, when the way that I was told and that I followed precisely didn't work out, I was like, to hell with logic, to hell with following this precisely, because it didn't work a few times. And then that made like these huge big repercussions of very traumatic events from what I could see. But the reason that didn't work out was because the math was wrong. Maybe. not because, yeah, not necessarily because it was actually more logical, but it's what I saw to be more logical. And then seeing what I saw to be more logical completely crumble and fall apart and be the most like dysfunctional thing I've ever seen, I mistakenly went full-heartedly, completely, and entirely into intuition. Don't make that mistake either. I think it's better than I think going into just full-heartedly into intuition is still better, and like gives more life. And there's something about that intuition that most people reject in Western society. That is beautiful and amazing, and that so many people are missing out on. But keep a level of that stability, foundational logic, and redo the numbers if that seems to result in something dysfunctional. It's because the foundational numbers you were working with on a logistical level changed without you realizing it. So yeah, I used to kind of like reject, and yeah, so I went into a phase of rejecting that logic to intuition, and now I see the value in both. I also saw myself as, I saw so many around me as being so logical that I'm like, that's rejecting a whole half of yourself, which is not actually a logical thing to do. A whole hemisphere of your brain to reject that. And so if everyone else is doing that, then I have to balance out what is in balance and go away from mainstream and go full hard into intuition to you know, to even it out a little bit. That was the thinking. Not the best thinking. No. Because I also had the mistaken perspective of thinking everyone else was logical somehow. And I had that mistaken perspective after being gaslit a lot. They weren't actually logical. Yeah, you gotta keep up with those numbers, man. You gotta keep up if you want to survive. So I think it is time to go to bed now, and this was really long. I wonder if anyone was gonna stay for this. It's just a brainstorm. It's sharing things that I've learned and telling it in ways that I hope other people have understood. I do feel like this is advanced in a way, although I can't exactly explain what steps you would have had to go through to understand what I'm talking about here. Like, in a way it's advanced. It's not advanced in a way that I know more than you. It's because everybody has their own very valuable experience, of course. But it is, I think, diving deeper and being more into the realm of what might be considered boring instead of just sort of quick hits of entertainment that I have fallen into, and others I know say they are drawn to a lot. And so it's not gonna work if you're coming from that. And again, it's not just short form social media. No, if you're coming from very spiritually simple, palatable, whether that be like spiritual or philosophical simplicity, not even simplicity, just repetitiveness. So if you're coming from a place of extreme repetitiveness, of jargon that I don't happen to be using here, it won't be understood. And like I said, it's not even to say it's like a higher level than you, but it's advanced in a way that I guess you probably would have had to listen to and read and understand some of the spiritual texts, some of the scientific literature that I have come to study and understand. And if you relate to any of that, there might be a resonance there. And that's the only way you can understand this. I think we all have traumas about not being understood and whatnot, so I could go into all my personal traumas of not being understood, but ultimately we all have those. So think of a time you were misunderstood, and I worry about the same thing here. Yeah. And that's also a survival thing, because systems can break down really rapidly when you are misunderstood, particularly by multiple people that you have relied on to learn from, or you've built a trust in, or any kind of thing like that. It could be various ways that plays out. So I hope somebody I hope somebody would like the pacing of this being probably a little bit slower, less flashy. I could say it's more enlightened, but that's also another label, right? I could say it's more woke, another label. And so if you resonate with any of those terms, you might understand a little bit of this a little bit better. Who knows? But, I mean, one thing I also think you won't understand is even my eye contact in this video. I look all around as I'm thinking. I don't look directly at the camera sometimes. So, that's another little oddity I know that I have there. But when I get into topics like this that are new, when I go into the long form, when I'm pulling from my brain, it's easier for my eyes to just sort of imagine either the little analogies that I have, or go back and pull from the library in my head of experience. And so I'm not directly necessarily looking at anything. The camera, how I look, I'll glance at that occasionally. But the library in my head, being what I want to speak about, is going to manifest in me sharing this information in pretty odd way to some people, I think. And I guess I'm just gonna have to accept that. So, yeah, here, I guess I'll try sharing this. I'll try sharing it and see what happens. I know I like to fall asleep to really long videos of people rambling on these kind of topics. So maybe maybe some of that has soaked in by osmosis and into my psyche and heart. And so maybe that's why I find it fun to create this pretty long video now. And it's getting longer. I just feel like talking still. Oh my gosh, what the heck? Yeah, so I do wonder if the words that I'm using are just things I've fallen asleep to. Some of these ideas, who knows where I was drawing it from. Probably a few AI videos in there. But then those AI videos draw off of all these other experts, or maybe not even experts, just random people. And so I could point, I used to be able to say certain ideas and then say exactly where I got them from. But at this point, it all kind of jumbles together. I mix it with my experience. I put my own words to it. And it morphs into something that I know isn't all mine, for sure. But I love listening to long things like this. And so if you fall asleep to this, great. Very happy for you for staying. If you don't fall asleep to this, very happy about you staying this long. I think I like doing this long video thing. I think I have a lot of ideas that if I just start talking, just come out. And it's pretty fun. I tend to have a more optimistic and positive and idealistic. Did I say idealistic already? Just barely. I might be getting tired. View of it right now. But a lot of the times it's not pessimistic. I don't stay in pessimism. I go into pessimism. And then sometimes it can and I think I'm often influenced by others who are more pessimistic, in real time. And so I can dive into all that darkness pretty deep. But for the most part, I lean towards the hope, optimism stuff. And with that said, dotted throughout even this, it's there's some concerning things when we're looking at reality still. That we would need to call into question so much more and dive way deeper with to really understand. And on the other side of that, there may be nothing good about it. And I do fully realize that. But I just happen to be in some kind of positive tone tonight. And I like, most of the time, I feel like I'm there. In the optimism sort of state, if you will. But there's undertones of more that's not completely that. And that to me is closer to truth and reality and something that you can draw on that might be more needed in some crazy circumstances, than just this optimism, pure optimism and everything. Although I do think I also take a more optimistic tone than some people I've heard, because I don't know why. It's just, again, and we're all sort of just nuclear reactors in a way. So spinning and energizing and processing and making things happen for life and for our consciousness and for yeah, I think of like the nuclear reactive thing is like something more inside of us, and then we're singing our songs, we're dancing our dance, we're telling our stories in whatever way, and that's the results of this energy that's like pulsating throughout our core and our being. And again, every individual being kind of their own universe in a way that we like can't completely control, but yet at the same time there's no way of getting away from the fact that we have an effect on everything. Like everything sort of affects everything, and sometimes that's ways that we can like logically plan for and then control and make in the ways that we want. But then with our own sphere, we see the positive impact on that. What we don't see sometimes is the hardship that can cause to people we don't know, to people in their own psyche as their own universes. We inadvertently enslave them, and that can happen too in certain ways. And then we ourselves experience a huge degree of having to not be our what might be considered as our authentic selves, or we have to go outside of who we want to be, outside of our own integrity or whatever, of how we want to be treated and treat others. Stepping out of that for the purpose of greater good or survival. Sometimes that happens. Again, it's like this big giant interplay, and you don't always know how your actions affect others. And you may think that your actions, because you're doing it from an integral place, are only affecting others in a positive way. But you may not see certain ways that you didn't realize that you were then siphoning off of their energy. Perhaps your ancestors took somebody's land, and that has continual repercussions for all the generations involved, where you're fed more and more and they're starved more and more. These are like very real things that look like they're actually like playing out in the world. So that's why judgment, I think, has to be let go of at a certain point to some degree, because I notice it seems like the ones who judge the harshest, I mean, they look like they have it the easiest. And then the people who feel like they have it the hardest, then they would judge the ones they think have it easier too. So that's another like interplay that can happen. between certain people or certain groups of people. So then they just end up judging each other, and then judgment isn't just judgment by yourself. As you judge these things, they create other kind of ripple effects. Sometimes you can have so much judgment, and if a person is coming from a place of great receptivity and desiring to really be harmonious with the people around them, that individual can find themselves in such a trapped place because any direction they go would be harshly judged. And so then they get cornered, and and you don't, like, people think, oh, this isn't applicable, this only happens with chickens in a pecking order. But think of it like this: have you ever felt like a scapegoated person? Or felt like you didn't belong because either like the way you saw the world seemed different than everybody else. You felt extra lonely. You felt not even that necessarily people had negative intentions towards you, but that can happen too. But that you had to go in like either a different direction than everybody else, or your role was so different that none of them understood you. I just feel like everyone has felt that way to a certain degree, and that's kind of what I'm describing. So if you've even felt that to a little bit of a degree, you would understand the pressure of that and how much receptivity you're holding for everyone, because it's not just about them judging you and you feeling judged. It's not that simple. It's about if the world around you, where you're supposed to survive, is teaming up against you. I'm thinking of like Inception, where the dream characters kind of turn on the person who goes into the dream, right? And it's just not a survivable condition. And when things turn like that, where they're not a survivable condition for individuals anymore, they see themselves as being forced to have to take drastic measures to survive that. And when that's the case, you get a lot of trauma building up. Like lots of back and forth, lots of fights. And so then I think we get into, it's like a mini snapshot on an individual biological human level of what's also happening in the stars of an expanding universe. What is it, a redshift, where in general, like you have a few stars and galaxies partly going towards each other, but ultimately everything is moving away from each other. And so if you get too much clash in a certain area, then those individuals slowly drift into their new domains or realms. And that's a peaceful way of not having so much of that clash. But we can have it on a really really bad way too. And that's, again, we're like going into control. Just leave. Don't try to control. Just attachment is a thing. We humans need attachment. We're not stars. So there's that. Yeah, it's not a very good analogy if you look at it like that. A lot of people need closeness, personal, like not just physical closeness, but an understanding that they're understood. And if that can't happen, the drift away has to happen at some point, whether that be a physical drift away or your hearts drifting away from one another. So tragic, right? Actually tragic, though. I was saying that in like a dramatic way, but actually. So, yeah, if the environment, which part of your environment is the people you try to control and the people trying to control you, they're part of that environment. And if that's happening in disharmonious ways, it can only result in more calamity. Not only, but most of the time, I think. Unless something is done to have at least a glimmer or hope of faith and understanding, at least of your own self, if nothing else. And then hopefully of environment and people as well. Yeah. And again, in one sense, if you take it as you're the projector, projecting your minds and your thoughts, and if you're really, really good at visualization, or I do this with music, actually, because music's my jam. If I'm listening to a song that I don't like, and I have to be in that location, I just completely overlay a whole different song on top of it and can't even hear that song. And that's like, I think some people can visually do that if they have like a very vivid imagination. And you project and overlay what your thoughts and built up experiences and beliefs and even images are onto the actual physical world around you. And in that sense, you're in total self-control and discipline over your own mind in a way. And that's what you're supposed to be at the control of. Like, you're supposed to be the controller of your minds, maybe your emotions. And that's a possibility, though. Because it is a buildup of your experiences, though, one could say you're not in control of what you've experienced. But I think you can also choose how to tell the story about your experiences. So, those are the things you can control, again. And then the things you can't are the settings themselves, particularly if you're contractually in an agreement to enter into another's domain and work with them, and they give you some sort of compensation for that. Then you can't really control that environment, but often because there's more humans there with similar needs, there should be at least a basic understanding of what the needs are for the people in that environment. And then it also becomes a win-win situation in that scenario too, because they meet your needs and you're building their, you're caring for, nurturing, building their enterprise, domain, business, religion, religious institute, whatever system that you're going into in that way and connecting with and being active in and a part of. And that's kind of how that works. So, yeah. Yeah, and then whenever, if it becomes disharmonious, when there's too much of a buildup of things that would harm the people within that system, or when the people are harming the system itself. It could go either way on that regard. So, there you have that. And again, I'm like speaking like quite generally. I'll go into a few examples of specifics here. And I went into more analogies than I was expecting myself to, but I'm hoping that you can take this and like it be so general that you can connect to something and be like, oh, this is how it fits in with me. Because again, all of our experiences they have quite a lot of differences. Let's be real. None of us are experiencing the same thing. We have a lot of similar patterns. I think I have an idea that we even like feel a lot of emotions in darn near the same ways. But I have no way of proving that. So who knows? Maybe not. But I just, again, it's a risk to follow my intuition and say that we experience emotions in like such a similar way as each other. That's a risky thing to say because it's an intuitive thing. There's no proof. So I think it might be time for me to go. I'm having fun playing with my hair. Yep. Did I say everything I was meaning to say? I don't know. But yeah, like the topics, I didn't go into Advaita and ego death because like those are really common topics. I did go into that like a little bit, but it turns out what's been on my mind is this, like, how much can we like change things, or how much are we subject to everything? And I think I could still keep talking about that for hours and then give a million examples. But I'll stop. I'll stop. Okay, bye. Bye. Yes. How do I stop this? That might be another reason this was a long video, because I don't know how to stop this. I'll try this.